Tonight we're going to talk about a holiday that feels as old as time itself. Christmas. Think of the smell of pine needles, the warmth of a fire, the taste of a favorite holiday treat. It all feels so comfortable, so deeply rooted in tradition. But what if I told you that for a time, in a place that was supposedly a beacon of Christian piety, celebrating Christmas was not just frowned upon, but illegal, and that one of the primary targets in this war on joy was a humble, spicy, festive pastry? Tonight, we're digging into the strange and surprisingly deep history of the mince pie, and how it became an unlikely symbol in a battle for the very soul of a nation. This is a story of God you don't know. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small, quiet gesture that helps this community of late-night history wanderers grow. And as always, I love seeing where you're all listening from. Go ahead and drop your city or country and the time in the comments. It's a wonderful way to feel connected in our shared stillness. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not in a quiet, sterile world of black hats and stark white collars. Not yet. You are in England, in the late 15th century. It is the 26th of December, and the party is just getting started. You are standing in the great hall of a manor house. The air is thick with the smells of roasting meat, wood smoke from the colossal fireplace, spilled ale, and damp wool. The stone walls are decked with holly, ivy, and mistletoe, their green a vibrant splash of life against the winter gray. The sound is a joyful cacophony, the cheerful twanging of a lute, the stamp of dancing feet on the reed-strewn floor, the barking of dogs scavenging for scraps, and the roar of laughter from 100 different conversations. This is Christmas. Or more accurately, the second of the 12 days of Christmas. This is not a single, quiet family holiday. It is a 12-day marathon of feasting, drinking, and organized chaos that stretches from Christmas Day all the way to Epiphany on January 6th. All work stops. The fields are fallow. The workshops are closed. It is a legally mandated holiday season, a time for the world to turn upside down. It's less silent night and more kegger in the Great Hall. The centerpiece of this joyful anarchy is a figure known as the Lord of Misrule. He is a local peasant or a man of lower rank, chosen by the Lord of the Manor or the Town Council to preside over the Christmas festivities. For 12 days, he is the king. He is the temporary CEO of chaos. His job is to command everyone from the lowest servant to the Lord himself to engage in merriment. He organizes dances, commands the singing of rowdy carols, presides over feasts, and leads a troupe of mummers in strange folk plays. Your modern office Christmas party has nothing on this. Tonight, the great doors of the hall are thrown open, and the Lord of Misrule enters, dressed in a gaudy parody of a king's robes, a crown of holly on his head. He is followed by servants carrying the feast, and the feast is a spectacle. There is a swan, roasted and then redressed in its own feathers to look as if it might fly off the platter. There are gallons of wassail, a hot, spiced, and dangerously alcoholic cider served from a massive wooden bowl. And there is the crown, jewel of the feast, a great platter bearing a boar's head, complete with an apple in its mouth, decorated with rosemary and bay leaves. You eat until you can't move. You drink until the torchlight begins to blur. You play games of chance, rolling dice on a tabletop, your small pile of coins growing and shrinking with the whims of fortune. It is loud, it is messy, and it is profoundly communal. Everyone, from the lord to the stable boy, is in this hall together, sharing the same food, laughing at the same jokes. Historians still debate whether this was a genuine release valve for the rigid social tensions of the medieval world, or just a deeply ingrained tradition whose pagan origins were already half forgotten. For you it is simply Christmas. It is a time of excess, of joy, of a world deliberately turned on its head. It is a celebration rooted in the darkest part of the year, a defiant shout of life and light against the cold and the gloom. And as you take another deep drink of warm wassail, you have no idea that a new kind of faith is quietly gathering on the horizon. A faith that will look upon this entire scene of joyful, chaotic, holy merriment and see nothing but sin, idolatry, and a profane mess that must be cleaned up. Asterisk amidst the chaos of the feast. A servant approaches your section of the long trestle table. He carries a large wooden platter, and on it sits something new, something you have been waiting for. It is not another glistening joint of meat or a fantastical beast. It is a pie, but it is not a round pie. It is a large, oblong, rectangular pastry, baked to a perfect golden brown. It looks less like a modern pie and more like an edible shoebox, or perhaps a small, golden cradle. And that is exactly the point. This is the Christmas pie. It is also known as a manger pie or a shred pie, and it is not just food. It is a sermon in pastry form, a dense, edible piece of Catholic symbolism that you can eat with a spoon. Every single element of its construction is designed to tell the story of the Nativity. First, there is the shape, that oblong shoebox. Form is no accident. It is meant to represent the wooden manger in which the newborn Christ child was laid. The pastry crust is the humble wood of the stable. Next, there is the lid. The pie is covered with a flat sheet of pastry, and sometimes a small, crude figure of a baby, fashioned from dough, is placed on top before baking. This is the Christ child himself, wrapped in his swaddling clothes of flaky crust. The symbolism is about as subtle as a cathedral bell. You are literally eating a representation of the baby Jesus in his manger. It's like the original Hot Pocket, but with significantly more theological baggage. And then there are the ingredients. This is where the story gets truly interesting, and where the pie's modern descendants have lost the plot entirely. You take your knife and cut a piece. A cloud of fragrant steam rises, carrying the rich, exotic scents of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. These spices are not native to the cold, damp Isle of England. They come from the east, from impossibly far away lands. They are here to represent the three gifts of the Magi: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But as you scoop the filling onto your plate, you see that it is not the jam-like mixture of fruit you might expect today. It is a rich, dark, glistening mass of shredded meat, dried fruits, and spices. The meat is often mutton, to represent the shepherds and their flocks who came to adore the Christ child. This is mixed with suet hard beef or mutton fat, which provides richness and moisture, and a tumble of dried fruits like raisins, currants, and plums. It is a heady, complex mixture of sweet and savory, a flavor profile that would confuse a modern celebrity chef but was the height of luxury cooking. In your time, historians still debate just how strictly the symbolism of the ingredients was followed. A popular tradition, which may be more folklore than fact, held that a proper Christmas pie should contain exactly 13 ingredients. This represented Christ and his 12 apostles. This would include the meat, the suet, the various fruits and spices, and perhaps honey or wine. Trying to hit that magic number of 13 must have been a fun, if slightly stressful, part of the Christmas cooking. You take your first bite. The buttery, flaky pastry gives way to the dense, rich filling. It is an explosion of flavor. The hearty, savory taste of the shredded mutton, the deep sweetness of the raisins, all brought together by the warm, fragrant Christmas spices. It is absolutely delicious. It tastes like wealth, like celebration, like the deep, comforting joy of the season. You are eating a story. You are consuming a physical representation of the entire nativity scene. And for you, a devout if perhaps slightly tipsy Catholic in 15th century England, this is a beautiful and holy thing. It is a way to make the story of Christmas tangible, to bring it from the pages of a book or the words of a priest directly onto your dinner plate. But as you savor the last bite, you are blissfully unaware that this very pie, this edible icon, will soon become a primary target for the new, severe form of Christianity that is coming. To bake, serve, or eat such a thing will be seen as nothing less than an act of blatant, shameless idolatry. The world of the great Christmas feast, with its Lord of Misrule and its edible manger, feels solid, eternal, unchanging. But it is not. A generation passes, and then another. You are now living in the 16th century, and the religious landscape of England is not just shifting. It is experiencing a series of violent, convulsive earthquakes. The single, solid foundation of the Roman Catholic faith upon which your grandparents' world was built has cracked wide open. It all starts, as so many big English stories do, with a king who wants a new wife. King Henry VIII needs a male heir, and his wife, Catherine of Aragon, has not provided one. He wants to annul his marriage and marry Anne Boleyn. The Pope in Rome, for a complex web of political reasons, says no. And Henry, a man not known for taking no for an answer, responds with one of the most consequential decisions in history. He effectively says, "Fine, if you won't be the head of my church, I will." He breaks with Rome, declares himself the supreme head of the Church of England, and gives himself the annulment he wanted. For you, an ordinary person living in a small village, the theological intricacies are distant and confusing, but the effects are immediate and deeply personal. It's like waking up one morning to find that the global corporation you've always worked for has been taken over by a new CEO, and he has a very different management style. The first thing you notice is the visual stripping down of your world. Royal commissioners arrive at the local monastery, the one that has been a center of learning, charity, and prayer for centuries. They dissolve it. They kick out the monks, seize the land for the crown, and sell the buildings to a local nobleman, who strips the lead from the roof and turns the chapel into a barn. The beautiful stained glass windows in your parish church, the ones that told the stories of the saints in colored light, are smashed out, deemed idolatrous. The statues of the Virgin Mary and the saints are pulled down from their niches and burned. The world of faith is becoming flatter, plainer, less colorful. Then the sound changes. You have grown up with the Mass recited in Latin. You didn't understand the words, but that was part of its power. It was a sacred, mysterious language, a holy murmur that connected you to 1,000 years of tradition. Now, under Henry's son, the boy King Edward VI, a new book is issued, the Book of Common Prayer. For the first time, the service is in English. You can understand every word. It is clear, it is direct, but for some, the magic is gone. The mystery has been translated into the mundane. This religious whiplash continues. After the fervent Protestantism of Edward, his half, Mary comes to the throne. She is a devout Catholic, and she drags the entire country back to Rome. The statues are put back up. The Latin Mass is restored. Priests who had married are forced to abandon their families. Protestants who refuse to renounce their new faith are burned at the stake as heretics. It is a time of fear, confusion, and bloody retribution. And then, Mary dies, and her half-sister Elizabeth I becomes queen. Elizabeth is a pragmatist. She attempts to create a religious settlement, a middle way that will satisfy most people. The Church of England she creates is Protestant in its core beliefs, but it keeps much of the old Catholic structure. There are still archbishops and bishops. The priests still wear vestments. People still kneel to receive communion, but for a small, devout, and increasingly vocal group of Protestants, this middle way is a travesty. They look at Elizabeth's church and they see a job half done. They see a church still cluttered with the popish dregs of Roman superstition. They believe the Reformation did not go nearly far enough. They want to strip away every last remnant of the old faith, the fancy robes, the incense, the stained glass, the kneeling, the bishops. They don't want to just reform the church. They want to purify it, and so they are given a nickname. At first, a term of mockery, the Puritans. Historians still debate how the common person navigated this dizzying series of changes. Did the average farmer really care about the complex theology, or was he more concerned that the monastery that once provided aid to the poor was now a pile of rubble? What is certain is that the old, unified world is gone, and in this new, fractured landscape, the old traditions are viewed with new suspicion. The 12 days of Christmas, with its boisterous feasting and its lord of misrule, now seems to the Puritan mind like a decadent, pagan relic. And the Christmas mince pie, that edible icon with its manger shape and its idolatrous pastry baby, is no longer just a festive treat. It is a symbol of the very faith they are trying to eradicate. The altar of England has a deep crack running right through it, and a cold, austere wind is beginning to blow. You are now living in the late 16th or early 17th century. Queen Elizabeth's middle way has created a fragile peace. But under the surface, the discontent of the Puritans is simmering. It is not a loud, public protest, not yet. It is a quiet, intense, and deeply personal movement, taking place in small congregations, in private homes, and most importantly, in the hearts of devout, serious-minded men and women. To understand why they will eventually declare war on a pastry, you must first understand what they believe. You decide to attend one of their services. You do not go to the grand parish church with its stone arches and remaining bits of stained glass. Instead, you go to a simple, whitewashed room in a private house, or perhaps a plain, undecorated meeting house they have built themselves. There's no altar, there is no crucifix, there are no statues or paintings. There is only a plain wooden pulpit, and rows of simple, hard wooden benches. The people here are dressed simply. The men wear dark, sober-colored doublets and breeches. Women wear plain gowns, their hair covered by a modest linen cap. This is where the stereotype of the dour, black-clad Puritan comes from, though historians now know their daily wardrobe wasn't exclusively black, but certainly favored practicality over ornament. It is a visual rejection of the silks, velvets, and laces of the royal court and the wider world. Their clothing is a statement. We are a plain people, concerned with plain truths. The service begins. There is no organ music, no choir singing complex harmonies. They believe such things are a sensual distraction, a performance designed to entertain rather than to edify. Instead, the congregation sings a psalm together, without instrumental accompaniment. The melody is stark, the harmony simple. They sing with a raw, unpolished fervor, their voices joined in praise, not performance. Then, the minister climbs into the pulpit. He is not a priest in the old sense. He is a preacher, a scholar of the word. He does not recite a memorized liturgy. He opens his Bible, and he begins to preach. And he preaches for a very, very long time. 2 hours is standard. 3 hours is not uncommon. His sermon is a dense, intricate, and passionate exploration of a single passage of Scripture. It is not filled with entertaining anecdotes or comforting platitudes. It is a work of rigorous theological analysis, a direct intellectual and spiritual engagement with the text. This is the heart of their faith. The Bible, and only the Bible, is the true source of God's law. Sola Scriptura, Scripture alone. This core belief is the key to everything else. For the Puritan, if a practice or a belief is not explicitly found in the Bible, it is a human invention, a superstition that must be discarded. They comb through their Bibles, searching for divine warrant for every aspect of their lives, and they don't find much of what they see in the established Church of England. They don't find archbishops or priestly vestments. They don't find candles on an altar or the sign of the cross. And they certainly don't find any mention of celebrating the birth of Christ on December 25th. This leads them to a radical and, for you, a shocking conclusion. Christmas is not a Christian holiday. They see it as a human invention at best, and a pagan monstrosity at worst. They are not entirely wrong about its historical roots. They correctly identify that many of the traditions you love, the evergreen decorations, the feasting, the Yule log, have their origins in pre-Christian winter solstice. Festivals like the Roman Saturnalia or the Norse Yule, for them, the Church of England has simply taken these pagan rites, sprinkled a little holy water on them, and given them a Christian name. This is not purification, it is contamination. Furthermore, they look at the Catholic elements of the holiday with deep suspicion. The very name, Christ's Mass, is abhorrent to them. The Mass is the Catholic ritual they have rejected, a ceremony they believe is filled with idolatry. And the mince pie, that edible symbol of the Nativity, to them, it is the most blatant idolatry of all. To create an image of the Christ child from dough and then to eat it is a grotesque parody of the sacred, a popish superstition that must be abolished. You sit on the hard bench, the preacher's fiery words echoing in the plain. Rumia, look at the serious, focused faces around you. These are not frivolous people. They are deeply, passionately devout. They live their lives with a profound sense of moral purpose. They believe they have been chosen by God. They are the elect, and their duty is to build a new Jerusalem, a community of saints living in strict obedience to God's law. Historians still debate the psychology of Puritanism. Was it born of a deep spiritual anxiety, a need for certainty in a changing world? Or was it a source of profound comfort and strength, a belief system that gave meaning and order to every aspect of life? For you, listening to this 2-hour sermon on the evils of religious imagery, one thing is becoming clear. The world is being divided into two camps. There are those who believe faith should be celebrated with feasting and music and joyful, physical ritual. And there are those who believe faith must be stripped bare, purified of all human invention, and expressed only through the plain, unadorned, and demanding Word of God. There is no middle ground between the great hall and the whitewashed room, and the mince pie is sitting right on the battle line. You are sitting in a quiet alehouse, nursing a small cup of beer, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke and wet wool. A man at a nearby table is reading from a small, cheaply printed pamphlet. It is not a story or a ballad. It is a torrent of furious, righteous anger. The man is Philip Stubbies, a devout and fiery Puritan, and the pamphlet is his masterpiece, The Anatomie of Ubiuses, a book that is rapidly becoming the talk of England. It's the 16th century equivalent of a long, furious blog post titled Everything You Love is Problematic. And tonight, he's taking aim at Christmas. His argument, read aloud in the hushed quiet of the alehouse, is as shocking as it is brilliant. First, he attacks the very foundation of the holiday, claiming it has nothing to do with Christ and everything to do with the pagan Romans. He thunders against the wanton gestures of the feasting and the heathenish vanity of the decorations. The holly and ivy you love to hang on your walls. That's not a celebration of life in the darkness of winter, he argues. It's a direct imitation of the Roman festival of Saturnalia, a week-long pagan party of debauchery. The great Yule log burning in the hearth is not a symbol of warmth and home. It is a remnant of Norse sun worship. You are not celebrating Christ, he insists. You are unwittingly participating in a pagan ritual. Then he turns his fire on the name itself, Christmas, Christ's Mass. For you, it's just a word, the name of the holiday. For the Puritan, it is a poisoned chalice. The Mass is the central rite of the Catholic Church, the very ceremony they believe is filled with idolatrous superstition. To call the holiday Christ's Mass is to tie it directly to the rags of the Popish Church, the institution they are trying so desperately to purify England from. It is, in their eyes, a name that stinks of incense and Roman corruption. They propose a new plainer name, Christide, and the mince pie, that festive, cradle-shaped symbol of the Nativity. In Stubbies' view, it is the most offensive abuse. Of all, he describes it as a form of gross idolatry, a cookshop idol. To take the sacred story of the Incarnation and reduce it to a pastry, to bake an image of the Savior and his manger and then to gluttonously devour it, as part of a drunken feast, it is a blasphemy of the highest order. He argues that it is no different from the Israelites in the desert forging a golden calf to worship. The mince pie is your golden calf. A tasty, spicy, suet-filled idol. This is a new and terrifying way of looking at the world. You have always seen the 12 days of Christmas as a time of community, of generosity, of light in the darkness. Stubbies and his fellow Puritans see it as a season of sin. They see the carols as foolish ditties, the dancing as a prelude to lust, the drinking as gluttony, and the friendly chaos of the Lord of Misrule as a blasphemous mockery of true, godly authority. Every aspect of the joy you once took for granted is now being dissected and labeled as a sin. Historians still debate whether these pamphlets converted the doubtful or simply confirmed for everyone else that Puritans were, to put it mildly, not very fun to have at a party. The writings of men like Stubbies did not immediately change the law, but they changed the atmosphere. They injected a poison of suspicion and guilt into the festivities. They drew a sharp line in the sand. On one side were the traditionalists, who saw Christmas as a harmless and holy time of communal joy. On the other side were the Puritans, who saw it as a spiritual sickness, a pagan and Catholic cancer that must be cut out of the body of the Church, if England was ever to be truly godly. You leave the alehouse and walk home through the cold, damp streets. The arguments from the pamphlet are ringing in your ears. You pass a house where a family is singing a carol, their voices carrying on the night air. A year ago, you would have heard it as a simple, happy sound. Tonight, you hear it differently. Is it a song of praise? Or is it, as Stubbies insists, the bleating of brute beasts? The war of words has begun, and the first casualty is your own simple, uncomplicated joy. Asterisk, the pamphlets and the fiery sermons continue for decades, a constant simmering background noise of religious discontent. The monarchy, first under the pragmatic Elizabeth and then under the Scottish King James I, manages to keep a lid on the simmering pot. James, in particular, is a firm believer in the old ways. He loves a good feast and a masque. In 1618, he even issues a book of sports, explicitly listing the traditional pastimes, like dancing and archery, that are permissible on Sundays after church. A direct slap in the face to the Puritan belief in a strictly observed Sabbath. The message from the crown is clear. The war on joy will not be won on our watch. But then James dies, and his son, Charles I, comes to the throne, and everything changes. Charles is not a Puritan. In fact, he is the opposite. He loves ceremony, art, and high church rituals. His wife, Henrietta Maria, is French, and, even worse in the eyes of the Puritans, she is a devout, practicing Catholic. Charles's court feels like a step backward, a return to the popish superstitions they have been fighting against for a generation. The tension between the king and the increasingly Puritan-dominated Parliament grows from a simmer to a rolling boil. The conflict is about many things, about who has the right to levy taxes, about foreign policy, about the very nature of governance. But woven through it all is the threat of religion. Parliament sees Charles's high church policies as a threat to the Protestant soul of the nation. The king sees Parliament's Puritanism as a threat to his divinely ordained authority. The middle ground has vanished. You are forced to choose a side. Are you for the king and the bishops, or for Parliament and the preachers? In 1642, the pot boils over. The English Civil War begins. It is a brutal, bloody conflict that pits neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother. The Royalists, the Cavaliers, are known for their long hair, their flamboyant dress, and their love of the old traditions. The Parliamentarians, the Roundheads, are known for their close-cropped hair, their sober dress, and their fervent, godly purpose. It is a clash of two entirely different visions of what England should be. You are a simple farmer, trying to keep your head down, but the war comes to you. One day a troop of Cavalier horsemen clatters through your village. Their plumed hats and lace collars, a splash of color against the gray sky. They demand food for their horses and ale for themselves, all in the name of the king. A week later, a grim-faced company of Roundhead infantry marches through. Their plain iron helmets and leather jerkins, a study in grim functionality. They gather everyone in the village square, and their captain delivers a fiery sermon, calling on you to fight for God and Parliament against the forces of tyranny and popery. The war drags on for years, and as Parliament's new model army, a disciplined and fanatically devout fighting force, led by a brilliant but severe man named Oliver Cromwell, begins to gain the upper hand. The Puritan vision of England starts to become a reality. They don't just win battles, they win the culture war. When they capture a town, one of the first things they do is cleanse the local church. Soldiers march in and smash the remaining stained glass. They pull down the altar and replace it with a simple communion table. They scratch out any idolatrous images with the points of their swords. Finally, in 1649, the war reaches its shocking conclusion. Parliament puts the king himself on trial for treason. It is an unprecedented event. They find him guilty. You stand in a vast, silent crowd in London on a bitterly cold January day. You watch as King Charles I, the Lord's anointed, walks onto a black-draped scaffold. He says a final prayer, and with a single, brutal stroke of an axe, the executioner severs his head from his body. A great, collective groan rises from the crowd. It is a sound of profound, world-altering shock. The divinely appointed king is dead. Parliament is supreme. And the Puritans, the once marginalized group of angry pamphleteers, are now in complete control of the nation. Historians still debate the complex chain of events that led to this moment, but for you, standing in the cold, the message is clear. The world has been turned upside down. The Lord of Misrule has been executed, and a new, severe, and very sober master is in charge. England is now a commonwealth, a republic, and it is about to become a very different, and much less merry, place to live. The king is dead. The war is over. England is now a commonwealth, a republic governed by a parliament of stern, godly men. The atmosphere of the nation has changed. It is quieter, more sober. The boisterous, chaotic energy of the old world has been replaced by a sense of grim, righteous purpose. And now that the Puritans have dealt with the king, they can finally turn their full attention to dealing with Christmas. You are living in London in 1647. The last of the royalist resistance is being stamped out. The city is firmly under the control of Parliament and Cromwell's new model army. And in June of that year, a new law is passed. It is not announced with trumpets or grand ceremony. It is a quiet, bureaucratic act, but its effect will be profound. the ordinance for abolishing festivals officially makes the celebration of Christmas, Easter, and Whitsun illegal. The language of the law is dry and legalistic, but its intent is fiery. It declares these holidays give license to carnal and sensual delights, and that they are used by the superstitious to scandalize the godly. Therefore, the ordinance commands, these feast days shall not be any longer observed. The law is very specific about what this means. December 25th is to be a normal working day. It is declared that all shops and markets must remain open. Anyone caught holding or attending a special Christmas service will be fined. Anyone caught feasting, decorating their home with holly, or engaging in any kind of profane merriment, is subject to punishment. It is, in effect, the legal cancellation of a holiday. It's as if your modern government declared that December 25th is now just another Tuesday, and scheduled a mandatory nationwide census on that day just to make sure you get the message. And the mince pie? The law doesn't mention it by name, it doesn't have to. The mince pie is not illegal because of its ingredients. It is illegal because of its timing. It is a piece of evidence, a fragrant, edible, smoking gun. To bake a mince pie on, or around, December 25th is to signal your defiance of the law, your stubborn attachment to the old, superstitious ways. The pie has become a form of protest. It is a contraband pastry, a symbol of quiet rebellion. Historians still debate how strictly this law was enforced. In London and other Puritan strongholds, the crackdown was serious. Watchmen would patrol the streets on Christmas Day, peering into windows, listening for the sound of singing, sniffing the air for the telltale scent of roasting meat or Christmas spices. But in the more remote, rural parts of the country, where royalist sympathies were still strong, the law was often quietly ignored. For you, in the city, the change is stark and immediate. On the morning of December 25th, you are woken not by the sound of church bells, but by the familiar weekday clatter of carts on the cobblestones. You look out your window. The tailor's shop across the street is open for business. The market stalls are selling their usual turnips and fish. There is no holly on the doors. There are no carolers in the streets. There is just the gray, damp business of an ordinary winter's day. Your home feels cold and empty. The fireplace is unadorned. There is no Yule log, no festive greenery. The air is not filled with the warm, spicy aroma of a baking Christmas pie. It smells of boiled cabbage and damp wool, just like any other day. The government has not just forbidden a party, it has mandated a new kind of sober quiet, a forced piety. And as you sit down to your simple midday meal, you can't help but feel that the joy has not just been outlawed, it has been stolen. The law says there is no Christmas. The law says the shops must be open, the churches must be silent, and the ovens must be cold. But you cannot erase 1,000 years of tradition with a piece of parchment. You cannot legislate joy out of the human heart. And so, all across England, a quiet, stubborn, and delicious rebellion begins to unfold. You are living in a small village in Kent, a county known for its royalist sympathies and its love of old traditions. The new laws from London feel distant and absurd. On Christmas Eve, you close the shutters of your small cottage tightly. You stuff a rag in the keyhole to block any prying eyes. You are turning your home into a tiny, secret fortress of festivity. Inside, the atmosphere is hushed and conspiratorial. You speak in whispers. A small sprig of holly, gathered secretly from the woods, is hidden on the mantelpiece where no one can see it from the window. Your children, who should be bursting with excitement, have been warned to be quiet, to make no loud noises. It's like you are part of a secret society, the Mince Pie Resistance. And the first rule of Mince Pie Club is you do not talk about Mince Pie Club. Your wife is in the kitchen, engaged in the most dangerous part of the operation. She is baking. The familiar, warm, spicy scent of cinnamon, cloves, and mutton suet begins to fill the small cottage. It is a wonderful smell, the smell of Christmas, but tonight, it is also the smell of sedition. You pray that the smoke from your chimney doesn't carry the incriminating aroma to the nose of a passing constable. She doesn't bake the great, oblong, manger-shaped pie of the old days. That would be too obvious, too overtly popish. The pies have gone underground, both literally and figuratively. They have been downsized. She now makes small, individual, round pies. They are easier to hide, easier to distribute, and their simple shape is less likely to attract accusations of idolatry. This is the moment. Historians believe that the modern round mince pie begins to evolve from its rectangular manger-shaped ancestor. It is a tactical adaptation, a pastry going into hiding when the pies are finally baked, golden and fragrant. They are not served openly. They are hidden away in a cool pantry. Later that night, there is a soft, coated knock at your back door. It is your neighbor, come for a secret Christmas gathering. You exchange a quiet greeting. You sing a carol, but in a low, hushed voice, barely above a whisper. It is a strange, melancholy kind of celebration, filled with a mixture of defiance and fear. You share a cup of warmed ale, and then, the main event. Your wife brings out the contraband pies. You eat them quickly, silently, savoring the familiar taste of Christmas. A taste that is now charged with the thrill of defiance. It is more than just a pastry now. It is a symbol. It is a quiet declaration that Parliament can pass its sober laws, but it cannot control your heart, your memory, or your stomach. Every bite is a small act of rebellion, a vote for the old merry England. These secret celebrations were happening all over the country. In some cities, pro-Christmas riots broke out. In Canterbury, a crowd of apprentices started a violent protest when the mayor tried to force the markets to stay open, decorating the city with holly and shouting royalist slogans. But for most people, the resistance was quieter, more domestic. It was the secret burning of a Yule log, the quiet singing of a forbidden song, the baking of an illicit pie. Historians debate how widespread this defiance was. The official records are, of course, written by the Puritan authorities and focus on enforcement, but the anecdotal evidence suggests that the attempt to cancel Christmas was deeply unpopular and widely ignored wherever possible. It was a classic example of a government passing a law that was completely out of step with the culture of the people. They could control the public square, but they could not control what happened behind the closed shutters of a private home. The spirit of Christmas hadn't been extinguished. It had just been driven indoors, where it survived on whispers and the warm, spicy scent of rebellion. Asterisk, while you are enjoying your secret, rebellious pastry, another man is walking the cold, damp streets of London. He is not celebrating. He is working. You are the constable of the watch for your small parish, and you are having a very, very bad day. Your job, handed down to you by the magistrates, is to enforce the ban on Christmas, and you are quickly discovering that it is the most awkward, unpleasant, and deeply unpopular task you have ever been given. Your day started with a tour of the parish, ensuring all the shops were open. You had to have a stern word with the baker, who was forgetting to take his shutters down. You had to disperse a group of young men who were loitering on a corner, looking suspiciously like they might be about to sing a carol. It was tense and unpleasant. These are your neighbors. You have known them your entire life, and now you are the official enemy of their good cheer, the Grinch in a government-issued coat. Now, as evening falls, the truly difficult part of your job begins. You must patrol the streets, looking for any sign of illegal festivity. You are a one-man patrol. You walk slowly, your lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the wet cobblestones. The city is quiet, almost too quiet. The silence feels resentful, sullen. You approach a house and you pause. You can hear the faint, muffled sound of music coming from within, a lute, perhaps, and voices singing softly. Your duty is clear. You are supposed to knock on that door, demand entry, and find the inhabitants for their illicit merriment. But you hesitate. The people inside are the Miller family. You know them well. Their son is apprenticed to your brother. Last year, before all this trouble, you shared a cup of wassail with them at the parish feast. Knocking on that door feels like a betrayal. So you do what many constables in your position probably did. You cough loudly. You clear your throat with a great rasping sound. You make a show of adjusting the buckle on your shoe, your metal-tipped staff clattering accidentally against the cobblestones. You are giving them a warning, a chance to quiet down, to put away the lute, to pretend they are simply having a quiet evening reading the Bible. After a moment, the music from inside stops. You nod to yourself, a silent mutual understanding having passed through the thick oak door, and you continue on your way. But then you turn a corner, and your heart sinks. You smell it. The unmistakable, deeply incriminating aroma of roasting meat and baking spices, wafting from the chimney of a nearby house. This is harder to ignore. A smell is a public nuisance, and you know that your superior, a particularly zealous Puritan magistrate, might be making his own rounds tonight. You approach the house. You can see the warm glow of a fire through a gap in the shutters. You hear a burst of laughter from within. You sigh. You have no choice. You raise your heavy hand and you knock on the door. The laughter inside stops abruptly. The door opens. A crack, and a man's wary, hostile face appears. "Yes, Constable," he asks, his voice cold. Behind him, you can see it all. A table laden with food. A small green branch of ivy on the mantelpiece. And there, on a platter in the center of the table, sits the evidence, a plate of small, golden brown, and deeply illegal Christmas mince pies. Historians still debate the precise legal penalties. The laws were often vague, and enforcement varied wildly from one parish to another. There was no set fine for possessing a mince pie with intent to celebrate. The punishment was likely a fine of 5 shillings, a significant amount for a common family, or perhaps a stern lecture and a public shaming. For you, the constable, the moment is acutely uncomfortable. You are not a tyrant. You are just a man, trying to do your job in a city where the law and the will of the people are in direct opposition. You look at the mince pies. You look at the nervous faces of the family. You mumble something about a breach of the ordinance and the need for public sobriety. You issue a fine, or perhaps just a stern warning. You feel the weight of their resentment as you close your notebook and turn to leave. And as you walk away, the delicious festive smell of the contraband pastries follows you down the street. A fragrant reminder that you are on the wrong side of history, and certainly on the wrong side of dinner. While you are navigating the awkwardness of secret mince pies and resentful constables in England, A different version of the story is unfolding across the vast and dangerous Atlantic Ocean. The Puritan spirit, that potent combination of profound faith and deep suspicion of joy, is not confined to the old country. It is an exportable commodity, and its most fervent practitioners have decided that if they cannot fully purify England, they will build a new, purer England from scratch in the wilderness of the New World. You are standing on the deck of a small, cramped, and foul-smelling ship in the middle of the ocean. The year is 1630. You are not a merchant or an explorer. You are a refugee. You are part of the great Puritan migration to Massachusetts Bay. You have left your home, your parish, everything you have ever known, to build a city upon a hill, a new society that will be a beacon of true, reformed Christianity to the entire world. The journey itself is a trial, a crucible that strips away all but the essentials. The ship is tossed by storms, the food is meager and full of weevils, and the stench of sickness and unwashed bodies is constant. When you finally arrive on the rocky shores of New England, you are not greeted by a welcoming paradise. You are greeted by a vast, dark, and intimidating forest, by brutal winters, and by the constant threat of starvation and disease. Survival is a full-time job. There is no room, and certainly no desire, for the frivolous excesses of an English Christmas. In this new, harsh land, the Puritan dislike of Christmas is not just a theological preference, it is a core part of your new identity. You have not fled England only to recreate its popish corruptions here. The ban on Christmas is not just a law, it is a foundational principle of your new society. You are now a settler in the small, growing town of Boston. It is a town of simple, sturdy wooden houses, and a single unadorned meeting house at its center. There are no theaters, no alehouses that encourage drunkenness, no dancing greens. It is a society built on hard work, sober piety, and a deep-seated fear of God's judgment. And on December 25th, that piety is on full display. The day is treated with a deliberate, almost aggressive normality. A new law is passed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1659 that makes the celebration of Christmas a punishable offense. It states that whosoever shall be found observing any such day as Christmas or the like, either by forbearing of labor, feasting, or in any other way, shall be fined 5 shillings for each offense. It is the English ban, but enacted with a new, colonial fervor. You see your neighbor, a man known for his godliness, making a point of loudly chopping wood in his front yard all day on December 25th. He is not just doing his daily chores. He is making a public statement. He is performing his lack of celebration. The town sawmills are ordered to run at full capacity. The shipwrights in the harbor continue their hammering. It is a loud, industrious, and pointedly unfestive day. Historians still debate how the children in these communities experience this. How do you explain to a child why the one day that the rest of the English-speaking world celebrates with feasts and gifts is, for them, a day of extra chores and solemnity? It must have been a strange and difficult lesson in the unique, demanding nature of their faith. The ban on Christmas in Boston will last for decades. It is not until the colony grows, and new, non-Puritan immigrants arrive like the Anglicans, who have a much friendlier view of the holiday, that the sentiment begins to change. But the cultural DNA has been set. For almost 200 years, Christmas in New England will be a muted, almost non-existent affair. It will not be declared a public holiday in Boston until 1856. The quiet, Puritan law against mince pies and merriment has cast a very long shadow. You stand at the edge of your settlement, looking into the vast, silent, snow-covered forest. Behind you is the town, with its determined, sober industry. In front of you is a wilderness that feels as pure and untainted as you hope your new church will one day be. There are no echoes of wassail bowls or lords of misrule here. There is only the wind and the pines, the crunch of snow under your boots, and the quiet, demanding task of building a new Jerusalem, one joyless, mince-pie-free Christmas at a time. While you are busy building your joyless utopia in the cold forests of New England, the situation back in England is becoming unstable. Oliver Cromwell, the powerful Puritan leader who ruled the Commonwealth as Lord Protector, dies in 1658. His son, Richard, briefly takes over, but he lacks his father's charisma and authority. The government, without a strong leader, begins to wobble. The people of England are growing tired of the grey, austere world of the Puritans. They are tired of the endless sober piety, the closed theaters, the cancelled festivals. They have had 11 long mince-pie-free Christmases, and they have had enough. There is a growing nostalgic longing for the old ways. For a bit of merriment, for a king, the mood of the country has shifted, and in 1660, the great Puritan experiment comes to a sudden and spectacular end. By overwhelming popular demand, the monarchy is restored. The executed king's son, Charles II, who has been living in exile in France, is invited back to claim his father's throne. His return is a national celebration. You are standing in the streets of London as he makes his triumphant entry into the city. The contrast with the old sober world of the Commonwealth could not be more stark. The streets are packed with cheering crowds. People are throwing flowers, banners and tapestries hang from every window. The air is filled with the sound of trumpets and the joyful, unrestrained ringing of church bells. It feels like the entire nation is breathing a collective sigh of relief. Charles II is the perfect antidote to the years of Puritan rule. He is witty, charming, and known for his love of parties, theater, fine clothes, and beautiful women. He is nicknamed the Merry Monarch, and he fully intends to live up to the title. One of the very first things he does is to repeal all the joyless Puritan laws. The theaters are reopened, dancing is encouraged, and, most importantly, Christmas is back. The Christmas of 1660 is one of the most extravagant and joyful the country has ever seen. It is a nationwide explosion of pent-up festivity. It's as if 11 years of missed parties are all being celebrated. At once, the Yule logs are dragged from storage. The wassail bowls are filled to the brim. The sound of carols, sung loudly and joyfully, once again fills the streets, and the mince pie makes its triumphant public return. You are in the kitchen of a great London house, preparing for the Christmas feast. The smell of baking spices once again fills the air, but this time it is not a smell of secret defiance. It is a smell of open, joyous celebration. You are baking dozens of mince pies, not the small, round, furtive pies of the Commonwealth, but the great, magnificent, oblong Manger pies of old. You place the little pastry baby on top with a flourish. The pie is no longer a symbol of quiet resistance. It is now a symbol of royalist victory, a tasty, edible declaration of loyalty to the newly restored king and the old merry ways. The famous diarist Samuel Pepys, a man who meticulously chronicled the life of this era, writes in his diary on Christmas Day, 1660, about his own celebration. He goes to church, where he notes with pleasure that the pews are decorated with rosemary and the altar has candles once again. Afterwards, he returns home for a fine dinner, which includes a good shoulder of mutton and a chicken, and for dessert, a mince pie, he writes, with a simple satisfaction that speaks volumes. The quiet law was dead. The pastry was legal again. Historians still debate the long-term effects of the Puritan ban. Did it permanently scar the English relationship with Christmas, or did its eventual failure only make the restored celebrations even more beloved? What is certain is that the attempt to erase the holiday failed completely. The roots of the tradition were too deep, the people's love for it too strong. You cannot ban a feeling. You stand in the crowded great hall, raising a cup of ale to toast the merry monarch. The lord of misrule is back. The minstrels are playing, and a great, steaming, and gloriously legal mince pie sits in the center of the table. The war is over, and joy, it seems, has won. Christmas is back. The king is on the throne. The theaters are open, and the scent of baking spices is once again a legal and welcome aroma in the streets. The great, symbolic battle has been won. But the mince pie, the edible icon at the center of the storm, has been changed by the experience. The years of prohibition and secret baking have left their mark. The pie that emerges from the Restoration is not quite the same pie that went into hiding. It is starting a slow, quiet evolution, a secular makeover that will gradually strip away its old religious meaning and transform it into the festive treat you would recognize today. You are in a kitchen in the early 18th century. A generation after the Restoration, you are still baking mince pies for Christmas, but the urgency and the political symbolism have faded. It is no longer an act of royalist defiance. It is simply a tradition. And traditions, without the pressure of persecution to keep them fixed, have a tendency to drift. First, the shape begins to change permanently. The great oblong manger-shaped pie, so overtly Catholic in its symbolism, starts to seem a bit old-fashioned, a bit too theatrical for a more modern Protestant England. The small, round pies that were a tactical necessity during the ban have now become the standard. They are convenient, they are elegant, and most importantly, they are theologically neutral. You are not baking a manger anymore. You are just baking a pie. The most obvious link to the nativity story is quietly being erased. Next, the little pastry baby on top, the edible effigy of the Christ child, disappears completely. Baking an image of Jesus on a pie now seems a bit strange. A little too enthusiastic, a word that the cool, rational 18th century used to describe excessive or unseemly religious fervor. The plain pastry lid is now decorated with a simple, elegant star, said to represent the Star of Bethlehem. It is still a Christmas symbol, but it is a much less direct, much less controversial one. It's like replacing a giant, flashing neon sign with a single, tasteful candle, but the biggest change is happening inside the pie. The filling is getting sweeter, much sweeter. The old medieval recipe, that complex mix of shredded meat, suet, and fruit, is starting to seem heavy and dated. To the refined palates of the Georgian era, sugar, once an expensive luxury imported from distant lands, is becoming cheaper and more widely available, thanks to the vast colonial plantations in the New World, and people are developing a serious sweet tooth. So the recipes begin to change. The amount of meat starts to decrease. At first, it's just less mutton, then, cooks start using more delicate meats, like shredded beef tongue, which has a milder flavor. The amount of suet remains for richness, but the quantity of dried fruits, the raisins, currants, and candied citrus peel begins to increase dramatically. More and more sugar and sweet spices are added. By the time you get to the 19th century, the transformation is almost complete. You are reading a recipe from a popular Victorian cookbook, perhaps Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management. You scan the list of ingredients for her excellent mincemeat. There are apples, raisins, currants, candied peel, sugar, brandy, and a huge amount of beef suet. But the shredded meat, the original, central ingredient, it is gone entirely. The pie has become a vegetarian. The mince in mince pie no longer refers to minced meat. It just refers to the finely chopped fruits and suet. Historians still debate the exact reasons for this shift. Was it the rising cost of meat? Was it the changing tastes of a society that now valued sweetness over the complex sweet and savory flavors of the past? Or was it the final, unconscious shedding of the pie's religious origins? The mutton, after all, was there to represent the shepherds. With the manger shape and the pastry baby long gone, perhaps the last symbolic ingredient no longer made sense. The pie has completed its journey. It began as a sacred edible icon, a sermon in a crust. It became a symbol of political defiance, a contraband pastry baked in secret. And now, it has settled into a comfortable, secular retirement as a simple, festive treat. It is still delicious. It is still a beloved part of the Christmas tradition, but its original, radical, and deeply Catholic soul has been almost completely forgotten. The quiet Puritan law didn't manage to kill the mince pie, but it did, in the long run, scare the religion right out of it. Asterisk, the pie has survived. It has changed its shape, sweetened its personality, and quietly shed its controversial past. It has settled into a comfortable and beloved place in the Christmas traditions of Britain and its former colonies. The great war between the Merriment and the Moralists is over. And yet, a strange echo of that conflict, a quiet ghost of that old Puritan law, continues to haunt the festive season to this day. You are sitting at your computer, scrolling through the internet in the weeks before Christmas. You see a meme, a funny tweet, or a headline from a British tabloid newspaper. It proclaims, with a tone of gleeful absurdity, that it is still, technically, illegal to eat mince pies on Christmas Day in England. The story is told every single year, as reliably as the appearance of tinsel in the shops. The article explains, with varying degrees of accuracy, that a law was passed in the 17th century by the humbug Oliver Cromwell, banning all festive celebrations, including the eating of mince pies. And, the article will gleefully point out, this law was never officially repealed. Therefore, the author concludes with a wink, every time you bite into a mince pie on December 25th, you are technically a criminal, a festive outlaw, bravely defying a centuries-old, forgotten piece of legislation. It's a delightful piece of trivia, a fun story to share over a glass of mulled wine. It is also, unfortunately, not true. But it's one of those wonderful historical falsehoods that is more fun than the truth, a kind of legal urban legend. Historians and legal scholars have patiently debunked this myth many times, but it refuses to die, precisely because it contains a kernel of a real historical memory. Here's the reality. The laws passed by Cromwell's parliament during the period known as the interregnum, the time between the kings, were in fact all declared null and void after the monarchy was restored in 1660. The Licensing and Revocation of Ordinances Act essentially wiped the slate clean. All the Puritan legislation, including the ordinance that banned Christmas, was effectively repealed in one fell swoop. The merry monarch was not interested in a piecemeal approach to fun. He legalized it all at once. So, where does the myth come from? It seems to stem from a different, and much realer, piece of 17th century legislation. During the same period, a series of strict laws known as the Blue Laws were enacted to enforce a sober and holy observance of the Lord's Day, or Sunday. These laws forbade all sorts of activities on a Sunday, from working and trading to playing games and engaging in unnecessary travel. It is entirely possible, historians speculate, that one of these blue laws, in a list of forbidden Sunday activities, might have mentioned feasting, and that this was later conflated in the popular imagination with the much more dramatic, but legally defunct, ban on Christmas. The real sin was not eating a mince pie on Christmas. It was doing anything fun, including feasting, on a Sunday. The fact that Christmas Day often falls on a Sunday might have added to the confusion. You can imagine a scenario where a particularly zealous Puritan magistrate might have used the Blue Laws to punish someone for holding a feast on a Christmas that happened to be a Sunday. The legal justification would have been the breaking of the Sabbath, but the festive target would have been Christmas. But the myth is just too good to let the facts get in the way. It is a charming ghost. It is a folk memory of a time when the state really did try to legislate what you could bake and when you could be merry. It's a reminder that the pies on your plate have a dramatic, rebellious, and surprisingly political history. So, as you see that meme for the 10th time, you can smile. You are not, in fact, a festive criminal. The mince pie is fully and legally rehabilitated, but the persistence of the myth tells its own story. It's the story of a nation playfully remembering a time when it was forced to be sober and celebrating the fact that, in the end, the pie and the party won. Asterisk. The mince pie is safe. It is legal. It has survived its turbulent adolescence and settled into a comfortable, sweet, and secular middle age. Christmas itself is back, but for nearly 200 years after the Restoration, it remains a somewhat rowdy and disorganized affair. It is a day for feasting and drinking, yes, but it lacks the cozy, family-centric, child-focused magic that you would recognize today. The old, chaotic, 12-day medieval Christmas is gone, and the modern Christmas has not yet been born. The holiday is in a kind of festive limbo, and then, in the 19th century, a queen falls in love, and a novelist writes a ghost story, and together, they will reinvent Christmas forever. You are standing in a dimly lit London street in the 1840s. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing. The air is thick with coal, smoke, and fog. It is a world of immense wealth and desperate poverty, a world of new factories and ancient traditions. And the traditions around Christmas are starting to change. The first great change comes from the royal palace. The young Queen Victoria has married her German cousin, Prince Albert. Albert brings with him the beloved Christmas traditions of his homeland, and the most charming of these is the Christmas tree. In 1848, a popular magazine, the Illustrated London News, publishes a detailed engraving. It shows Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, and their young children gathered around a small fir tree placed on a tabletop. The tree is decorated with candles, small toys, and sweets. This single image is a sensation. It is the original viral post. Every middle-class family in Britain sees this picture of the perfect, loving, domestic royal family, and they want to be just like them. Suddenly, everyone needs a Christmas tree. The old tradition of decorating with holly and ivy is now supplemented by this new, German import. The Christmas tree moves the center of the celebration from the Great Hall to the private parlor, from the communal feast to the nuclear family. At the same time, another force is at work. A young, phenomenally popular author named Charles Dickens is troubled by the harshness of industrial society and the plight of the poor. He believes that Christmas, with its message of charity and goodwill, can be a force for social reform. In 1843, he writes a short, spooky, and profoundly sentimental story called A Christmas Carol, the story of the miserly Ebenezer Scrooge, his long-suffering clerk Bob Cratchit, the adorable Tiny Tim, and the three ghosts who scare Scrooge into becoming a better man is an immediate and overwhelming success. Dickens doesn't just tell a good story. He creates a powerful, secular mythology for the holiday. He crystallizes a new vision of what Christmas should be. It should be a time for family gatherings, for lavish feasts like the Cratchit's Goose, for playing parlor games, for giving to charity, and for a general feeling of warmth, generosity, and keeping Christmas well. He takes the old feasting tradition and gives it a new, powerful moral purpose. Historians still debate the exact influence of these two forces. Did Victoria and Dickens invent the modern Christmas, or were they simply reflecting and popularizing trends that were already bubbling up in society? It was likely a bit of both. They were brilliant amplifiers, taking the faint signals of a new kind of Christmas and broadcasting them to the entire nation. And the mince pie finds its perfect place in this new Victorian Christmas. It is no longer a political statement or a religious icon. It is a symbol of domesticity, of home baking, of cozy, fireside tradition. It is the perfect treat to leave out for Father Christmas. Another tradition that solidifies during this era. You read a popular children's poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, and you see a new version of the gift-bringer, a jolly old elf with a sleigh and 8 reindeer. You look around at this new Christmas. There is a tree sparkling with lights in the corner of your parlor. You are reading A Christmas Carol aloud to your children. You are preparing to eat a turkey, not a boar's head. And you have left a mince pie and a glass of sherry by the fireplace for a man who will supposedly come down your chimney. The old Puritan War is a distant, almost unimaginable memory. The holiday has been completely and brilliantly rebranded. It has been transformed from a rowdy quasi-religious folk festival into a secular sacrament of family, charity, and domestic bliss. And the mince pie, now small, round, sweet, and unassuming, has found its final, peaceful role as a quiet, comforting, and essential part of the magic. So here you are, lying in your bed, in the quiet of a modern winter's night. The world outside is a universe away from the feasting halls of medieval England or the stark, whitewashed meeting houses of Puritan Boston. And yet, the echoes of that long, quiet war are still with you, baked into the very traditions you now enjoy. You think back on the journey of this humble pastry. It began as an edible icon, a dense, savory, manger-shaped sermon that you could eat with a spoon. It was a physical manifestation of the nativity story, a way for people to taste and touch the mystery of their faith. Every ingredient had a meaning. Every spice was a symbol. It was a pie with a soul. Then, it became a target. In the eyes of the reformers, it was an idol, a popish superstition, a golden calf made of pastry and suet. It was a symbol of everything they wanted to purify from their church and their nation. The pie became political. It became a piece of evidence in a great cultural and theological battle. That battle turned into a real war. And when the Puritans won, they made the pie illegal, not by name, but by circumstance. The quiet law that forbade the celebration of Christmas turned the pie into a contraband, a symbol of stubborn, secret defiance. It changed its shape, going underground, becoming small and round to survive. It was a pastry in hiding, a taste of rebellion baked in secret kitchens and shared in hushed whispers. When the monarchy returned and the parties resumed, the pie returned to public life. But it was not the same. It was a veteran of a long war, and it carried the scars. It had lost its religious certainty. It slowly shed its symbolic ingredients, the pastry baby, the manger shape, the sacred mutton, and embraced a new, sweeter, more secular identity. It became less of a sermon and more of a snack. And finally, in the warm domestic glow of the Victorian era, it found its final, comfortable home. It was rebranded, along with the rest of Christmas, as a symbol of family, tradition, and cozy, fireside cheer. It was the perfect treat for a new, sentimental age. The once controversial pastry had become the ultimate comfort food, so the next time you see a mince pie, perhaps sitting on a plate at a holiday party, dusted with powdered sugar, remember its incredible journey. Remember that it was once shaped like a cradle. Remember that it was once filled with meat and meaning. Remember that it was once illegal, a tiny, edible act of protest. Remember that it was at the very center of a battle over how faith should be felt and how joy should be expressed. The old arguments are over. The Puritans and the Cavaliers have long since laid down their swords. But the questions they fought over still echo. Should faith be a thing of solemn, sober, inward piety, or a thing of joyful, communal, outward celebration? Is it found in the plain word of a book, or in the sensory richness of ritual and tradition? It is a tension that still exists within faith, and within all of us. And the humble mince pie, in its own quiet, flaky way, was once a soldier in that very war. And now, the story is told. The long, strange history of this festive treat can begin to fade, like the scent of spices in a kitchen long after the baking is done. Let the images of the feasting halls and the stark meeting houses, the kings and the constables, all dissolve into the quiet of your room. The only thing left is the gentle feeling at the heart of the story, the warmth of a tradition that has survived. A tradition that has been fought over, banned, and reinvented, but has endured. It is a comforting thought. It is a reminder that even in the midst of conflict and change, the simple good things often find a way to carry on. You can let that comforting thought be a soft pillow for your mind. Let go of the details of the story. Let go of the thoughts of your own day. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to do. The only task that remains is to rest. Don't feel the quiet settle around you, a soft blanket of peace. Feel your body grow heavy and warm. Your breathing is slow and steady, a gentle, sleeping rhythm. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are drifting, peacefully and easily, into a deep and restorative sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.